4 hours, 17 minutes, and 42 seconds. That was the exact time Hope Davis ran pushing her paraplegic brother in a wheelchair, 26.2 miles, in the pouring rain, with a knee that screamed with every single step. But what no one knows is who was waiting for them at the finish line and why they were crying. This is a story about finish lines, not the ones measured with stopwatches, the ones measured with tears, the ones crossed with love, the ones that seem impossible until someone decides they aren't. Hope Davis was 38 years old when the world showed her that some pains can't be cured with medicine. They're cured with movement. They're cured by running. But she learned that long before that rainy morning in New York City. She learned it when she was 22 and her father died of lung cancer. The doctor said 6 months. They got 4. 4 months watching her father disappear before her eyes. 4 months feeling utterly powerless. 4 months of not being able to do anything. The morning of the funeral, Hope left her house before dawn. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she needed to move. She started walking, then jogging, then running. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran until her legs trembled. She ran until her tears dried up. And when she finally stopped, she was 10 miles from home, lost, exhausted. But for the first time in 4 months, she felt something other than grief. She felt freedom. That day, a runner was born. For the next 8 years, Hope ran. She ran in the mornings before work. She ran at night after work. She ran when she was happy. She ran when she was sad. She ran when she didn't know what to feel. She completed her first marathon at 25. Time, 4 hours, 45 minutes. She didn't win anything. She didn't break any records. But she crossed that finish line crying like she'd never cried before, because she understood something that would change her life forever. Crossing a finish line isn't about winning. It's about finishing what you started. It's about proving that you can. It's about turning pain into movement. For the next 7 years, Hope ran 12 more marathons. Her best time was 3 hours, 52 minutes at the Boston Marathon. She wasn't a professional. She didn't have sponsors. She only had her legs, her will, and a reason to keep going. But the human body has limits, and sometimes those limits break. It was mile 22 of the Chicago Marathon. Hope felt something strange in her right knee, a crack, a sharp pain. She kept running. Mistake. By the time she crossed the finish line, she could barely walk. The diagnosis was devastating. Torn meniscus, damaged cartilage. The doctor was blunt. "You can casually jog again," he said. But marathons, those days are over. Hope was 33 years old, and the one thing that kept her sane was taken away. The next 2 years were dark. Hope stopped running, stopped moving, stopped feeling. She worked as she could, cleaning houses, cleaning offices, cleaning up other people's messes while her own piled up. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that it can always get worse. And 3 years after her injury, it did. Michael Davis was Hope's younger brother, 6 years younger, 32 years old, a construction worker by trade, a father by choice, a husband by love, and a runner by family inheritance. Ever since he was a kid, Michael followed in his sister's footsteps, literally. When Hope ran through the neighborhood, Michael ran behind her. When Hope trained for marathons, Michael ran his own 10Ks every Sunday. He was never as fast as her, never had her endurance. But he had something Hope deeply admired. He had joy. Michael ran smiling. Michael ran laughing. Michael ran as if every step was a gift. And he always told Hope the same thing. "One day we're going to run a marathon together, sis. You in front, me behind. But both of us crossing the same finish line." Hope always smiled and said yes, someday. But that day never came. On March 15th, 3 years ago, Michael was working on the construction of a mansion outside of New York City. It was a big project, 4 stories, Huge garden, swimming pool. The owner was a construction businessman named Richard Harding, owner of the company where Michael had worked for 5 years. That day, Michael was on the 3rd floor, working on scaffolding that several workers had reported as defective, scaffolding that the company had promised to repair, scaffolding that was never fixed. At 2:47 p.m., the scaffolding collapsed. Michael fell 30 feet that changed everything. They took him to the hospital in an ambulance. Hope arrived running. Cruel irony, running on a destroyed knee to find her brother destroyed. The diagnosis was final. T6, T7 spinal cord injury, complete paraplegia. Michael Davis would never walk again, never run again, never follow in his sister's footsteps again. The following months were hell. Michael spent 3 months in the hospital, 4 months in rehab, and then nothing. Richard Harding's company paid the minimum legal compensation, $120,000, barely enough to cover the medical bills. There were no apologies, no visits, nothing but silence. And Michael sank. First he lost his legs, then he lost hope, then he lost his wife. Lauren, his wife of 7 years, the mother of his children, couldn't handle the situation. A year after the accident, she told him she was leaving, not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't see him like that. Destroyed, bitter, lost. She took the children. Sophia, 8 years old. Charlie, 5. Visits every 2 weeks, if Michael wanted. But Michael didn't want anything. Michael didn't want to see anyone. Michael didn't want to get out of bed. Michael just repeated the same phrase over and over. I'm good for nothing. I'm good for nothing. I'm good for nothing. Hope saw him deteriorating every day. They lived together now, in Hope's small apartment. She worked cleaning houses from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. He stayed in bed staring at the ceiling. She cooked, cleaned, cared. He barely ate, barely spoke, barely existed. And every night, Hope fell asleep, wondering the same thing. How can I save him? How can I give him back his life? How can I make his eyes sparkle again? The answer came in the most unexpected way. 2 years ago, Hope landed a job as a housekeeper in a mansion in Bel Air. The house belonged to a businessman named Richard Harding, the very Richard Harding who owned the construction company. The same Richard Harding responsible for the scaffolding that crushed Michael. But Hope didn't know that. To her, Richard was just another rich boss. Another man who paid well and demanded a lot. Another face without a story. Richard was 54 years old, a widower for 2 years. Breast cancer had taken his wife, Lauren. He worked 16 hours a day, not because he loved the work, but because the work kept him occupied. And occupied meant not thinking about Lauren, not thinking about the mistakes, not thinking about the scaffolding he never repaired, because Richard knew. He knew that Michael's accident was his fault. He knew he had ignored the safety reports. He knew he had prioritized the schedule over human life, and every night that knowledge devoured him. But he never did anything. He paid the settlement and closed the case and moved on, as if nothing had happened. Hope worked in Richard's house, completely unaware of all this. She cleaned his floors, washed his dishes, tidied his clothes, and never imagined she was cleaning the house of the man who destroyed her brother. But life has a way of connecting the dots, even when we don't see them. It was a Tuesday night. Hope was at home, having dinner with Michael. Well, she was eating. Michael was staring at his plate, not touching his food, like every night. The television was on. A commercial appeared, the New York City Marathon, first Sunday of November, 26. 2 miles of glory. Registration open. Hope watched the commercial with a pang of nostalgia, remembering when she could run, remembering when her body was free, remembering when crossing finish lines was possible. And then she saw something on the screen that made her stop. Special category, assisted wheelchair, for participants with motor disabilities and their assistants. Hope looked at Michael. Michael was staring at the ceiling, as always. And in that moment, something clicked in Hope's brain. A crazy idea, an impossible idea, an idea that would change everything. What if Michael could cross a marathon finish line, not by running, but by crossing it? With her help, with her pushing him, with her being his legs. The idea was ridiculous. Hope hadn't run in 5 years. Her knee was shot. Michael hadn't left the house in months, and pushing a wheelchair for 26.2 miles was physically brutal. But Hope couldn't get the idea out of her head. That night she didn't sleep. She spent the whole night researching on her phone. Assisted wheelchair category. It existed. It was real. Not many people used it, but it was legal. The assistant pushed the chair throughout the entire course. The wheelchair participant crossed the finish line. Both received finisher medals. Hope calculated the dates. There were 147 days until the marathon, 147 days to train, 147 days to prepare, 147 days to do the impossible. And she made a decision. She wouldn't tell Michael anything, not yet. First, she had to know if it was possible. First, she had to prove that her body could handle it. First, she had to demonstrate that it wasn't just a dream. The next morning, Hope woke up at 4:30 a.m., an hour earlier than usual. She put on workout clothes she hadn't worn in 5 years, and she went for a run. The first steps were agony. Her knee screamed. Her lungs burned, her legs trembled, but she kept going. She ran 2 miles that first day, 2 miles that felt like 20, 2 miles that almost killed her. But when she got home, sweating, crying, barely breathing, she smiled because she had started, and starting is always the hardest thing. The next few days were brutal. Hope trained at 4:30 a.m., before Michael woke up, before the sun rose, before the world saw her. She ran through the empty streets. She ran through the dark parks. She ran alone with her thoughts, and every step hurt. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the pain of seeing Michael lifeless. After 2 weeks, Hope faced a problem. Running was one thing. Pushing a wheelchair was another. She needed to train with weight. She needed to simulate the real conditions. She needed a wheelchair. But sports wheelchairs were expensive. Very expensive. Hope earned way $200 a month. $800 went to rent and food, $200 to Michael's medicine. That left $200 for everything else. A new sports wheelchair cost $2,500. Impossible. But Hope wasn't looking for a new one. She was looking for a used one. And after weeks of searching the internet, she found one. A used racing wheelchair, $800, in good condition. Seller in Albany. Hope didn't have $800, but she had time. 4 months to save. 4 months of sacrifice. 4 months without spending on anything other than the essentials. And she did it. For 4 months, Hope saved every dollar. She didn't buy new clothes. She didn't go out anywhere. She didn't treat herself to anything. And while she was saving, she kept training, without a chair, but with ingenuity. She got 3 bags of cement, 88 pounds each. She put them in an old shopping cart and started pushing. The first few days were brutal. The cart weighed 264 pounds with the 3 bags. Hope could barely move it. Her arms trembled, her back screamed, her knee cried with every step. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Every time she wanted to give up, she thought about Michael. She thought about his empty eyes staring at the ceiling. She thought about his voice saying, "I'm good for nothing." And the rage made her keep going, not the rage against the world. The rage against the idea that her brother was lost. That rage became fuel. That rage made her push harder. Every morning, 4:30 a.m., in the garden of Richard's house. Because the garden was big. Because no one used it so early. Because it was the only place where she could train without being seen. Hope ran in circles, pushing the cart with cement, sweating, crying, muttering, "You're going to cross that finish line, Michael. I promise you." You're going to cross that finish line. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and Hope kept training. Day 30. She could run 6 miles while pushing the weight. That day, Hope cried tears of joy in the shower. 6 miles. It seemed like so little, but just a month ago she could barely run 1.25 miles. Progress was slow, but it was progress. Day 45. She could run 9 miles. That day, a neighbor saw her leaving at 4:30 a.m. He asked her where she was going so early. Hope smiled faintly and said she was going for a walk. She couldn't tell him the truth. No one could know, not until she was sure it was possible. Day 60. She could run 12.5 miles. A half marathon with weight. Hope remembered her first half marathon 15 years ago. She ran it in 1 hour and 50 minutes. Without weight. Young, healthy. Now at 38 with a destroyed knee, pushing almost 300 pounds, she did it in 2 hours and 30 minutes. Slower. Much slower. But she did it. And that was the only thing that mattered. Day 75. Something changed. Hope noticed that her body was adapting. The pain was still there, but it was different. It was a familiar pain. A pain she knew. A pain that no longer scared her. Her knee creaked every morning, but it held. Her arms trembled with every push, but they pushed. Her back screamed with every mile, but it endured. The human body is incredible when it has a reason to be, and Hope had the best reason in the world. Day 90. She could run over 18 miles. That day, Hope allowed herself to believe that it was possible, believe that she could do it, believe that Michael would cross that finish line. 18 miles was the point where most marathon runners break. It's where the body says, enough! It's where the mind starts to negotiate. It's where the dream becomes a nightmare. But Hope passed that point, with weight, with pain, with tears. But she passed it, and that gave her the confirmation she needed. She could do it. She was going to do it. Michael was going to cross that finish line. Her knee hurt every day, but every day it hurt less than seeing Michael without Hope. On day 120, Hope finally had enough money. She traveled to upstate New York near Albany. The trip lasted 3 hours by bus. 3 hours thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if the chair didn't work? What if the seller was a scam artist? What if $8,000, 4 months of sacrifice, were lost in a second? But when she arrived at the address and saw the chair, she knew it had been worth it. It was a used racing wheelchair, top-end Eliminator brand, 5-year-old model, but in excellent condition. The seller was a man in his 50s named Robert. He had run 3 marathons pushing his wife with multiple sclerosis. Now his wife had passed away, and he wanted the chair to have a new life, a new story, a new finish line to cross. When Hope told him what she wanted it for, Robert cried. She told him about Michael, about the accident, about the depression, about the 147-day plan. Robert listened in silence, and when Hope finished, he said something she would never forget. "Your brother is going to cross that finish line," Robert told her, "because you're not just a runner, you're a warrior, and warriors always finish what they start." Robert charged her $7,000 instead of $8,000. He told her to keep the $1,000 for bandages and knee gel. She was going to need it. Hope returned to New York City with the chair. She hid it in a storage unit near Richard's house. She couldn't take it home. Michael would see it, and Michael couldn't know. Not yet. There were 27 days left until the marathon, and Hope had to do something that terrified her. She had to tell Michael, but before that, something happened, something that would change everything. It was a Saturday morning, 4:30 a.m. Hope was in Richard's backyard, training as always, pushing the empty chair across the lawn, crying as always, murmuring as always. She didn't know someone was watching her. Richard Harding couldn't sleep that night. Insomnia. Like many nights, guilt wouldn't let him rest. Since Elena's death, the nights were worse. Elena always told him that he worked too much. Elena always told him that he ignored what was important. Elena always told him that one day he would regret it. And she was right. Richard regretted everything. Not having spent more time with her, not having repaired that scaffolding, not having been a better person. That night he walked to his bedroom window. He saw light in the yard. Strange. It was 4:30 a.m. No one should be out there. Richard went downstairs silently. He opened the garden door, and he saw something that left him paralyzed. His housekeeper, Hope, in workout clothes, pushing an empty wheelchair across the lawn, running in circles, sweating, crying, murmuring something he could barely hear. "You're going to cross that finish line, Michael. I promise you." Richard stood motionless, observing, not understanding who Michael was, why Hope was doing this, why she was crying, why she was promising. Richard said nothing. He stayed in the shadows, watching, and something in his chest began to ache in a different way. The next few days, Richard investigated discreetly, without Hope knowing. He checked the human resources files. Hope Davis, housekeeper for 2 years. Address: a small apartment in Queens. Registered relatives: a brother named Michael Davis. Michael Davis, the name sounded familiar, too familiar. Richard searched his company's files and found what he feared. Michael Davis, construction worker, employed from 2018 to 2022. Work accident, March 15, 2022. Cause: scaffolding collapse on a construction site. Result: spinal cord injury. Complete paraplegia. Compensation paid: $120,000. Case closed. Richard felt the world collapsing. The brother of his housekeeper, the man he had destroyed, the man whose injury he was responsible for, lived with Hope. The woman who cleaned his house, the woman who was training in his backyard, the woman who was trying to do the impossible for her brother. Richard saved the files, closed the computer, and cried. For the first time in years, he cried for Elena. He cried for Michael. He cried for all the mistakes he had made. He cried for the person he had become. But tears don't change anything. Only actions do. And Richard still didn't know what to do. There were 25 days left until the marathon. Hope continued to train. Richard continued to watch. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., Richard Harding would watch from his window. He would watch Hope Davis run. He would watch Hope Davis cry. He would watch Hope Davis make promises. And every morning, the guilt grew. One day, Richard found something on the kitchen counter, an application form for the New York City Marathon. Category: assisted wheelchair. Participant: Hope Davis. Assistant: Michael Davis. Reason for entry: my brother dreamed of running a marathon. I'm going to run for both of us. Richard read those words 3 times. My brother dreamed of running a marathon. I'm going to run for both of us. And something inside him broke. Or maybe it was repaired. It's hard to tell the difference. There were 20 days left. Hope finally found the courage to tell Michael. She came home after work with the sports wheelchair. Michael was in his bed, as always, staring at the ceiling, as always. Hope wheeled the chair in and placed it in front of him. Michael looked at the chair, then at his sister. "What's this?" he asked. "Your marathon chair," Hope replied. "We're going to run 26.2 miles together." Michael didn't understand. He didn't process it. He didn't react. He just stared. Hope explained everything. The 147 days of training, the 4 months of saving, the 4:30 a.m. mornings, the pain in her knee, the tears, the promises, everything. When she finished, Michael was crying for the first time in months. "No," he said, "I can't. I'm good for nothing." Hope sat next to him and took his hand. "Michael," she said, "you always wanted to run a marathon with me. Me in front, you behind, both of us crossing the same finish line. Remember?" Michael nodded, sobbing. "Well," said Hope, "the plans changed a little. Me pushing, you in front, but the goal is the same." and we're going to cross it together." Michael didn't reply. He couldn't. The words wouldn't come, only the tears. Hope hugged him. She hugged him like when they were kids. She hugged him like when their father died. She hugged him as if she could transmit all the hope he had lost into that embrace. And after a long silence, Michael whispered, "Okay, let's do it." The next 20 days were intense. Hope trained with Michael for the first time. He in the chair, she pushing. It was different from pushing cement. It was heavier, it was harder, but it was real. It was Michael, it was her brother, and that made it all worth it. The first day of training together was a beautiful disaster. Michael hadn't been outside in months. The sun hurt his eyes. The street noise overwhelmed him. The stares of the people made him want to hide, but Hope wouldn't let him. "Keep going," she'd say. "Don't look at anyone but me. I'm your legs now. You just have to be present." The second day was a little better. Michael began to notice things he had forgotten. The smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of birds in the morning, the feeling of the wind on his face. Simple things he had taken for granted before the accident, things that now seemed like small miracles. On the third day, something changed. Hope took him to a park where they used to run together when they were young. Central Park, the same park where Michael had first told her that he wanted to run a marathon with her. Michael looked at the paths. He looked at the trees. He looked at the runners passing by. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt something that wasn't pain. He felt nostalgia, but not the nostalgia that destroys, the nostalgia that motivates. "I want to feel that again," said Michael. "I want to feel like I'm running, even if it's in a chair." Hope smiled and started pushing faster. The wind hit Michael's face. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair. His heart beat faster, and for a moment, a brief, glorious moment, Michael felt like he was flying. The following days established a routine. 5 a.m., Hope woke Michael up. 5:30 a.m., light breakfast, banana, water, a granola bar. 6 a.m., they went to the park before sunrise. 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., training, increasing distance each day. 8 a.m., return home, shower, change of clothes. 9 a.m., Hope left for work at Richard's house. Michael stayed alone, but no longer alone with just the ceiling, alone with different thoughts, thoughts of goals, thoughts of possibilities, thoughts of a future he had believed dead. On day 10 of the 20, something magical happened. Hope and Michael were training in Central Park. They had covered 9 miles. Michael was exhausted from sitting for so long. Hope was exhausted from pushing, but they kept going. And then they saw something. Another wheelchair. Another person pushing. A man in his 60s pushing a woman of similar age. Also training. Also running. Also dreaming. The 4 looked at each other. They didn't say anything. They just nodded. The universal greeting of those who understand the impossible. Those who know that some goals are not measured in time. They are measured in love. Hope kept pushing, but now she was smiling. They were no longer alone. There were other crazies like them, other dreamers, other fighters, and that made the madness worth it. On day 15, Sophia and Charlie came to visit Michael, the children he had stopped seeing regularly, the children who barely recognized him in his depressed state. But that day, Michael was different. He was outside. He was in the sports wheelchair. He was sweating. He was alive. "Dad," asked Sophia with huge eyes. "What are you doing?" "Training," replied Michael. "Your aunt and I are going to run a marathon." Sophia didn't understand. Charlie didn't either. But they saw something in their father's eyes that they hadn't seen in years. They saw light. They saw hope. They saw the dad they remembered before the accident. "Can I push you too?" asked Sophia. Michael looked at Hope. Hope nodded. 8-year-old Sophia put her little hands on the chair and started pushing. She didn't get far. It was too heavy for her, but she tried, and the attempt was all that mattered. 5-year-old Charlie ran beside the chair, shouting, cheering. Come on, Dad, you can do it. Come on. Michael cried that day, but not from sadness, from something he had forgotten existed, from joy. On day 18, Lauren came to pick up the kids, and she saw something she didn't expect. She saw Michael outside. She saw Michael smiling. She saw Michael being a father again. He said nothing. He just looked, and something in his face changed. Something that looked like guilt. Something that looked like regret. Something that looked like doubt. Had he done the right thing by leaving? Or had he fled from something that could still be saved? On the 19th, Hope took the final test, 26.2 miles, the full distance. She set off at 4 a.m. and returned at 8:30 a.m., 4 hours and 30 minutes. Her knee was destroyed. She could barely walk, but she had done it. She knew she could do it. Tomorrow's the day, she told Michael that night. Tomorrow we cross that finish line. Together. Michael looked at her. And if we don't make it? He asked. Hope smiled. Then we will have tried, she replied, and that's already more than most people do. Neither of them slept that night. Michael couldn't stop thinking about the finish line, about what crossing it would mean, about the person he would be afterward. He thought about everything he had lost in 3 years, his legs, his wife, custody of his kids, his job, his dignity, his reason for living. But he also thought about what he was gaining. A sister who loved him beyond all logic, a second chance, a finish line to cross. Hope couldn't stop thinking about her knee, about what would happen if it gave out halfway through, about what she would say to Michael if she failed. She thought about all the obstacles they had faced, the 147 days of secret training, the 4 months of saving every penny, the lonely and painful 4:30 a.m. runs, buying the chair, revealing her plan to Michael. The 20 days of training together, they had come so far, too far to fail now, but the fear was still there, silent, constant, waiting. At 2:30 a.m., Hope got up. She went to Michael's room. She found him awake, staring at the ceiling, but not like before. Before, he stared at the ceiling with empty eyes. Now, he stared at the ceiling with eyes full of everything, full of fear, full of hope, full of everything it meant to be truly alive. I can't sleep, Michael said. Me neither, Hope replied. What if we don't make it? Michael asked. Hope sat on the edge of his bed. She took his hand like when they were kids. Then we will have tried, she said. And that's already more than most people do. Michael smiled, the first genuine smile in a long time. Thanks, Hope, for everything. Hope squeezed his hand. Save your thanks for the finish line, she said. You're gonna need 'em when we're crying like babies. They both laughed, a nervous laugh, a real laugh, a laugh that had been waiting 3 years to come out. But when the clock struck 3 a.m., they both got up. They both got dressed. They both looked at each other, and they both said the same thing. Let's do this. Michael didn't talk much during training, but he was starting to change. He was starting to eat. He was starting to sleep better. He was starting to look forward instead of at the ceiling. And one day, as Hope was pushing him through a park, Michael said something she would never forget. Thank you, Hope, for not letting me die. Hope kept running, but the tears were falling. Day 145, 2 days before the Boston Marathon, Richard Harding made a decision. He was going to be at the finish line. He was going to see Hope and Michael cross it. He was going to face what he had done. He was going to apologize, even though he didn't deserve it, even though he was 3 years too late, even though nothing could change the past. Because important finish lines aren't just for runners. They're also for cowards who finally decide to stop being afraid. Marathon Day, first Sunday in December, 4:30 a.m. Torrential rain. Hope and Michael were at the starting line, 8,000 runners around them. But in the assisted wheelchair category, there were only 3. 3 chairs, 3 dreams, 3 impossible goals about to be attempted. Michael looked at his sister. Ready? He asked. Hope looked at the rain. She looked at the 26.2 miles ahead. She looked at her knee that already hurt before starting, and she smiled. "I was born ready," she said. At 5 a.m. the starting gun fired, and Hope started to run. The first few miles were energetic. Mile 1, Hope found her rhythm. Her legs remembered the pavement. Her body remembered the movement. Even though it had been 5 years, a runner's body never forgets. Mile 3, the rain started to fall harder. But the rain didn't matter. The rain was just water, and water doesn't stop those who have a mission. Mile 5. They passed the first hydration station. Hope grabbed a cup of water without stopping. She handed another to Michael. They kept going, without pauses, without doubts. Mile 7. Other runners started to notice the chair. Some looked with curiosity, some looked with pity, but most looked with respect, because they recognized what they were seeing. They recognized the sacrifice in every push. They recognized the love in every step. They recognized the beautiful insanity of attempting the impossible. The adrenaline helped. The excitement helped. The cheers of the spectators helped. Michael was in the chair with his eyes closed, feeling the wind, feeling the rain, feeling the movement. For the first time in 3 years, he felt alive. Mile 10. All good. Hope was maintaining a good pace. Her knee was protesting, but it was manageable. Michael was starting to smile. The other runners were yelling encouragement. Everything was going according to plan. Mile 21, half marathon, and then it happened. Hope's knee cracked. A horrible sound, a sharp pain. She almost fell. She almost stopped. She almost gave up. Michael felt it. He felt the rhythm change. He felt that something was wrong. "Stop, Hope," he said. "Stop, this isn't worth it." Hope kept running, limping, but running. "I didn't come here to stop," she said. "We came to cross a finish line, and we're going to cross it." Mile 30. Hope could barely walk. Each step was agony. Each meter was a battle. But she kept going. The spectators were starting to notice. They saw this broken woman pushing a wheelchair. They saw the determination on her face. They saw the tears mixed with rain. And they started to applaud. They started to shout her name. Hope, 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 without knowing how appropriate that name was at that moment. Mile 35. Hope was falling to her knees. She got up. She fell again. She got up again. Michael was crying in the chair. "Enough!" he shouted. "Please, enough! I don't want you to destroy yourself for me." Hope stopped. For the first time in 35 miles, he stopped. He walked to the front of the chair. He looked Michael in the eyes. "Listen to me," she said. 3 years ago, you stopped living. You stopped smiling. You stopped trying. But I never stopped believing in you. And today, there are just 4 miles left to prove to you that impossible goals only exist until someone decides to cross them. So, shut up and let me finish what I started." Hope went back to the rear of the chair and started pushing again. Mile 24, Hope fell one last time. Her knees slammed against the wet asphalt. Her hands were shaking. Her body screamed at her to stop, but she got up one more time and started running, and the last 2 miles were eternal. Each step was a miracle. Each yard was a victory. Each second was a battle won against the impossible. And then they saw it, the finish line, 200 yards away, 100 yards away, 50 yards away. Michael raised his arms. For the first time in 3 years, he raised his arms to the sky and shouted, "We did it!" Hope pushed with the last of her strength. She crossed the line, 4 hours, 17 minutes, 42 seconds, and collapsed. She collapsed on the wet ground. Her body no longer responded. Her legs couldn't hold her. Her knee had finally given out, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except one thing. They had crossed. They had arrived. They had done it. Hope was on the ground, crying, laughing, shaking, all at the same time. Crying from pain, crying from joy, crying from relief, crying because 147 days of sacrifice finally had a result. Crying because her brother had crossed a finish line. that everyone said was impossible, crying because in that moment, lying on the wet asphalt, she realized something. Her father would be proud wherever he was. He would be watching her with a smile because she had done what he had always taught her. She had turned pain into movement. She had turned despair into hope. She had run when the world said to stop. Michael was shouting from the chair. His arms were still raised to the sky. The rain fell on his face, but it didn't matter. The tears mixed with the rain, and for the first time in 3 years, they were tears of joy. "We did it, sis. We did it. We did it!" He repeated those words over and over again, as if he couldn't believe them, as if he needed to say them, to make them real. "We did it." The other runners passing by stopped to watch. Some applauded, some cried, some knelt beside Hope to help her up, but she didn't want to get up. Not yet. She wanted to stay there, a moment longer. She wanted to absorb the moment. She wanted to etch it into her memory, forever. 4 hours, 17 minutes, 42 seconds, the time it took to do the impossible, the time it took to prove that love has no limits, the time it took to give Michael the only thing he needed. A finish line crossed, a reason to keep living, proof that he was still good for something. The paramedics came running, the spectators applauded. The other runners stopped to watch, and in the crowd, a man walked towards them, a man of 54 years, a man with tears in his eyes, a man who had been waiting at the finish line since 4 a.m., Richard Harding. Hope saw him approaching. She didn't understand. What was her boss doing here? Why was he crying? Why was he looking at her that way? Richard knelt beside her, beside Michael, and said something that neither of them expected. "Michael," he said, "my name is Richard Harding. I am the owner of the construction company where you used to work. I am responsible for the scaffolding that ruined your life, and I've come to ask for your forgiveness." Silence. Absolute silence. Michael looked at Richard. Hope looked at Richard. The whole world seemed to stop. Richard continued. His voice trembled. His hands trembled. His whole body trembled with the weight of 3 years of guilt finally coming out. 3 years ago, I ignored the safety reports. My workers told me that the scaffolding was defective. They told me 3 times. And 3 times I told them we'd fix it later, that the schedule was more important, that we couldn't fall behind. I prioritized money over the lives of my workers. I prioritized my schedule over your future. I prioritized being efficient over being human. And when you fell, I didn't go to see you in the hospital. I didn't go to apologize. I didn't go to face what I had done. I paid the minimum legal compensation, $120,000, as if your life was worth that, as if your legs were worth that, as if your future was worth that. I closed the case. I went on with my life, or so I tried, but the guilt doesn't go away when you ignore it. It accumulates, it rots, it turns into something that eats you from the inside. I've lived with that guilt every day since then. Every time I sat at my desk, I thought of you. Every time I walked through my construction sites, I thought of you. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a coward. I've wanted to ask for your forgiveness every day since then. I've written that letter of apology 100 times, and 100 times I tore it up because I knew I didn't deserve it, that your forgiveness was too much to ask for. But I was a coward. Until today. Michael said nothing. He couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Richard took an envelope out of his pocket. "Inside, there's a check for $2 million, he said, "a letter of apology that I wrote with my own hands, and a job offer adapted to your needs in my company, if you ever want to come back. But I know that none of this changes what I did. I know that none of this gives you back your legs. I know that I probably don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, every day. That seeing you cross that finish line today has given me more hope than I've had in years. Richard put the envelope in Michael's hands. He stood up and started to walk away. But before he could take 3 steps, Michael spoke. Richard. Richard stopped. He turned around. Michael looked at him with eyes that sparkled for the first time in 3 years. I don't need your money, Michael said. What I needed was to cross that finish line, and my sister gave it to me. But if you really want redemption, use that money to help others cross theirs. Silence. Richard nodded. Tears were falling. Hope watched, unable to believe what was happening. And in that moment, in the middle of the rain, in the middle of the pain, in the middle of everything, something new was born. 6 months later, the Possible Goal Foundation, founded by Richard Harding, directed by Hope Davis, with Michael Davis as the training coordinator. The foundation donated sports wheelchairs to people with disabilities. They trained assistants for marathons, organized inclusive races throughout Mexico. In the first year, they donated 50 chairs. In the second, 100. In the third, 200. 50 people with disabilities crossed marathon finish lines with the foundation's help. 50 dreams that seemed impossible became reality. 50 Michaels and Hopes found their own version of hope. Hope Davis underwent knee surgery, paid for by Richard. The operation was a success. She ran again, not as fast as before, not as far as before, but she ran, and now she led a team of 20 trainers, helping others do what she had done. Michael Davis got his children back. Lauren saw the change, saw Michael come back to life, saw his eyes sparkle again, and agreed to joint custody. Sophia and Charlie spent 3 days a week with their father, 3 days of laughter, 3 days of stories, 3 days with a man who had returned from the dead. Michael completed 3 more marathons in the next 2 years. The second marathon was in Boston. Time, 4 hours, 35 minutes, slower than the first, but it didn't matter, because Sophia and Charlie were waiting at the finish line. His children, the children he had stopped seeing. The children who now looked at him with eyes full of pride. The third marathon was in Chicago. Time, 4 hours, 12 minutes, faster than the previous ones, because Lauren was at the finish line. His ex-wife, the woman who had left him 2 years ago, the woman who now looked at him differently, the woman who after the race told him that she wanted to try again. The fourth marathon was in New York City, exactly 1 year after the first. The same route, the same rainy weather, but a different person in the chair, a different Michael, a Michael who no longer said, "I'm good for nothing," a Michael who now said he was good for everything, always with hope pushing, always crossing the finish line together, always crying at the end, because some tears are not of sadness, they are of gratitude, they are of victory, they are of love. Richard Harding sold 40% of his company, reduced his work schedule from 16 hours to 8, donated $5 million to the foundation, implemented the strictest safety policy in the industry, 0 defective scaffolding. In 3 years, 0 accidents at his construction sites, 0 families destroyed, 0 new guilts to carry. And every Sunday, Richard went to the cemetery to visit Elena. He told her everything, the foundation, the marathons, the redemption. He told her that he was finally doing the right thing, that he was finally being the person she always knew he could be, that he was finally living, not just existing, but truly living. Today, the Possible Goal Foundation operates in 12 cities across the U.S. New York City, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Miami, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Denver, 12 cities where there are now people crossing goals they thought were impossible. It has expanded to Canada, the UK, and Australia. In Canada, 50 chairs donated. In the UK, 75 chairs donated. In Australia, 100 chairs donated. 3 countries where Hope's dream continues to grow. 3 countries where the name of the foundation means exactly what it says. Possible goal. Because all goals are possible. They just need someone willing to push. 500 chairs donated in total. 500 people who can now dream of crossing finish lines. 500 Michaels who recovered the hope they had lost. 200 marathons completed by beneficiaries. 200 finish lines crossed that doctors said would never be crossed. 200 victories against the impossible. 1,000 families impacted. 1,000 homes where there is now hope. 1,000 tables where possibilities are now discussed. 1,000 hearts that started beating strongly again. All because a housekeeper decided her brother was going to cross a finish line. All because 147 days of pain turned into a life of purpose. All because love knows no impossibilities. And every time someone crosses a finish line, pushing a loved one in a wheelchair, the spirit of hope and Michael is there, reminding them that impossible goals only exist until someone decides they aren't. There's a photo that has become famous in the inclusive running community. A photo taken at the finish line of the New York City Marathon. It shows an exhausted woman, drenched in rain, collapsed on the ground. It shows a man in a wheelchair with his arms raised to the sky. It shows a digital clock that reads 4:17:42, and it shows something more. It shows hope, not the person, the emotion. It shows that pain can become movement. It shows that love can become kilometers. It shows that the most important goals are not measured in time. They are measured in tears. They are measured in sacrifice. They are measured in the decision not to give up when everything seems impossible. Michael Davis has a phrase he repeats every time he trains someone at the foundation. He says, "My sister ran 26 miles with a destroyed knee, not for a medal, not for a time, for my eyes. She wanted my eyes to sparkle again, and she did it." So when you feel like you can't go on, remember this: someone somewhere is willing to destroy themselves for you. The least you can do is try. And if no one is willing, be that person for someone else. Because impossible goals are crossed, step by step, tear by tear, mile by mile. And when you finally arrive, when you finally cross that line, you understand something that no stopwatch can measure. You understand that you weren't running alone. You were never running alone, and that is the goal that really matters. Cross your goal, even if it hurts, even if it rains, even if everyone says it's impossible, because someone is always waiting for you on the other side, and that someone deserves to see you arrive. One last thing, there's a photo circulating on the internet. A photo of an exhausted woman crossing a finish line. A photo of a man in a wheelchair with his arms raised to the sky. A photo of a clock reading 4:17:42. That photo has been shared millions of times. It has inspired thousands of people to attempt the impossible. It has reminded the world that love has no limits. And beneath that photo, there's always the same comment, and there's always the same question: who is she? And the answer is always the same. She is Hope, and he is Michael. And together, they crossed a finish line that no one thought possible, because that's what love does. It turns the impossible into the inevitable. It transforms pain into momentum. It converts tears into fuel. And it transforms ordinary people into heroes. Not heroes with capes, not heroes with superpowers, heroes with destroyed knees and hearts intact. Heroes who push when the world tells them to stop. Heroes who cross finish lines when everyone says it. You can't be done. You too can be that hero. You too can push someone towards their goal. You too can transform someone's pain into momentum. You just need to decide. You just need to start. You just need to take the first step, and then the second, and then the third, until 26. 2 miles becomes a cross line, until the impossible becomes possible, until you, too, have a photo that inspires the world. Cross your finish line. Today, now, because someone is waiting for you on the other side, and that someone deserves to see you arrive.